Right. Next thing I would like to mention is the climate. How we're all going to burn. We're all going to burn. Speaking of being a parent, what are you doing? Why would you condemn them to such a world? No, surely not. Surely not. We're going to talk about being embarrassed on the world stage because of our recent decisions about climate and our emissions targets and all of those fun things. So we had the COP30 this week, I believe. Now, do we prefer this one? Or do we prefer this one? I think I preferred this one. Oh, no, I was going to shrink it. Never mind, we'll just do this. You guys prefer? You can read? Yeah, you can read. We can read. We can read together. So, yes, embarrassing. International climate expert at COP30 scorns New Zealand's methane targets. Story that came out yesterday. New Zealand's climbed down on its methane emissions targets, and its agricultural emissions tax is dangerous and embarrassing, an international climate science and policy expert says. Speaking from COP30 Global Climate Summit in Brazil, Bill here said the New Zealand government's recent decisions were completely contrary to scientific consensus. It is unbelievable this has happened against a backdrop of a rapidly warming planet. An increasing scientific concern that methane emissions have to be reduced absolutely and quickly. The government announced last month it would lower New Zealand's methane emission target from 24 to 47% reduction by 2050 and a 14 to 24% reduction, considering sufficient to meet no additional warming goal compared to 2017 levels. This no additional warming goal, I believe, has come out of the anti-climate science, pro-business, pro-oil think tanks, essentially, in which they've gone, hey, it's fine how it is. We can't do any better. Let's just not do any additional warming. Let's try and keep it exactly as it is now, not realizing the compounding effects of keeping it as it is now, because it will just get worse. So yeah, no additional warming. This is also a Seymour thing. He loves his no additional warming. Total bullshit. Total bullshit in climate science. It's a non thing. You cannot achieve, magical thinking lobby. You can't achieve you can't achieve climate change, the targets we need. You can't reverse the climate change effects that we're seeing with no additional warming. We have to get it down. So here, a physicist and former lead author of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change is currently the chief executive of the not-profit Climate Analytics. He was responding to remarks made to RNZ by Climate Change Minister Simon Watts, who said he was prepared to explain the rationale for the new methane targets to other delegates at the COP. At COP. What is COP? Climate change? Climate? What is the COP? I know it's COP30. What is COP? Does anyone know what the COP stands for? That would be great. Other delegates at the COP, if we get questions around that, which will potentially be the case, for other countries that have pastoral farming systems, then we'll be dialoguing on that. Ugh, business speak. He has said it was difficult to understand how New Zealand can make a constructive contribution to COP30 with this kind of attitude. Methane has contributed to around 1/3 of global of warming so far, and I would be extremely worried if New Zealand, proportionally a country with a very large agricultural sector, were to be touting its methane rollbacks here in Brazil, where the COP was happening. The adoption of a no additional warming target rather than pursuing more emission reductions was an embarrassing and humiliating capture by industry. Talking about us. Always about us. It's so sad. Coalition of Ostriches. Conference of the Parties, COP. 30th Conference of the Parties under the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change. Thank you, Paul. Thank you. See, you guys are so smart. I I don't need to do this whole show. You guys are smart. You could just do it yourself. You don't need me. It is a very dangerous time, very dangerous at a time we have to reduce the warming impact of methane, and very, very quickly. There was a global agreement to reduce methane, he said. New Zealand remains a signatory on the Global Methane Pledge, where several dozen countries have pledged to globally lower methane emissions by 30% from 2020 levels by 2030, which is 5 years away, guys. Just the whole 5 now. I can't believe when 2030 and 2020 and 2025, like the smoking thing, the 2025 smoke-free, not anymore. When that came out when I was a kid, or 2025, what year did you have to be born? You had to be born in like 2008 or 2009, I think. And then you were basically like, free from big tobacco. The children born after 2008 will never be affected by tobacco. Woohoo! I remember when that came out and I was like, wow, 2025, it's so far away. And now it's like 2030 is 5 years away. Cool. That would be great. Right. There has been a global agreement to reduce methane, and what New Zealand has done is completely contrary to this. It seems hell-bent on maintaining methane at today's high and unsustainable levels. Ralph Sims, an emeritus professor in sustainable energy and climate mitigation at Massey, also said the New Zealand delegation might face awkward questions. I don't think New Zealand is going to be held in high regard. Ouch. There may be some agricultural countries that might look over the fence to see what New Zealand's got in mind, but I don't think there's going to be a huge acceptance of what the government is planning at the moment. Sucks to be Simon Watts. But you're part of it. This is your party. You're the minister of it. This is your government. I hope you get so much shit for this. I hope he's had the worst time. Go back to this one, please. I thought we had the worst time at COP. Oh no, Simon Watts. Oh, Simon No Watts. Oh, you guys are funny. You guys are funny. Kamatata, because I saw it. NACs hate police more than they let on. They defund them and are going by their attitude to climate change. They clearly think all cops are bad. I love that. They're so smart. You guys are smart. You guys are smart. And I've been told it's emeritus. Basically retired, but won't be put out on pasture just yet. Thank you. Emeritus. There you go. The more you know. Love the description. So further on this, there was quite a bit of, this is a video actually I saw a wee while ago by Simon Clark, who is a climate science communicator. And he put out a video about a month ago, which was titled The Worst Month in Climate Change News and Climate Science News. And this really, he basically goes through all of the things where it was like, this is down, this is down, this is down, these are down. Like all the numbers were down, or had gone up and down, and they're just bad ways. So he went through all of those, but his reaction to it was really telling, and it kind of hit home a little bit. And I was like, shit, this sucks. This is the world we're living in. But I thought I'd play this wee bit before we go into the next story. Well, the same story, but some of the 1.5 target type stuff. And let's see what a climate scientist, been doing this for like 10 years. Let's see what his reaction is to the worst month in climate change news.
Those are the big news stories. And with all of these, I can't tell if it's better or if it's worse. That none of this is surprising. Almost nothing that's happened this month is surprising to scientists who have been saying this stuff for decades. I've been a full-time science communicator specializing in climate since I finished my PhD at the end of 2017. I've been following the climate space for much longer than that. And this is unquestionably the worst month for climate news of my entire career. It has never been this bad. And to get ahead of a comment that I probably would have myself left maybe 10 years ago, referencing the Simpsons movie, that this is actually the best month for climate news for the rest of your life, that simply isn't true. We could talk about when CO2 emissions are likely to peak, and thus when the maximum increase of CO2 in the atmosphere in a given year will take place. Or we could talk about the solutions becoming more and more aligned with the 2-degree trajectory because technology moves further along the S-curve. But frankly, the big thing is that you only pass the first red line of the climate space, the first global tipping point, once. And that's what's happened this month. This is a milestone moment in the history of our species where we have officially pushed a global system past its breaking point. I'm very aware that...
Yeah. So we as humans, despite all of the experts, all of those people, again, all of those people who work in the ministries, who work in the not-for-profits, all the scientists at the universities who get paid by governments or paid by private, just get ignored by private interests, by people who want to be millionaires. The number of billionaires in the last year has gone up by some crazy amount. By people who just want to sit at the top and look down at all of us and go, suck it, you can all burn, you can all, drown. Like, we don't care what happens to your house. My house is fine. I live on a fucking hilltop. Ain't no climate change gonna affect me. It's so depressing. Funnily enough, he does turn the video around and he does have a silver lining at the end of it. One of them is like, I'm playing a game where I get to pollinate, what's it? Where you get to like make a planet and do whatever I want on the planet. And I'm like, oh yes, escapism. But he was just saying about like being the whole thing that we've talked about a lot, which is like being sustainably angry and like knowing when our limits are met and when we have to be like, I need to step away and like, all of this is shit, and yes, I have to know about it, and yes, we have to be aware of all of these things, but like, I need to step away and play video games so that I can come back and help the good fight. Or maybe your way of doing things is not being like me and speaking about this on the internet. Maybe that's too much for you. Maybe you like being in the comments. That's great. Maybe you don't like going to events, but maybe you like to be able to do advocacy on the internet. So each of us has a role to play. There are sometimes, I did see from him recently, a couple of months ago, he did also say there were some good targets, there were some good things happening. He also mentions that the coral reefs in this video, the coral reefs are fucked. But I did see a couple of months ago that the coral reefs were good. So we trying. Like, I think unfortunately the 90% of us who are good people, who are doing, the individuals who are doing our best, are just being like, we just have to work so much harder than the 10% who are pushing and making the planet unlivable, unfortunately. Yeah, that stuck in my mind. But the reason that it stuck in my mind and why I wanted to show you that is because this story came through today. Beyond 1.5, so the 1.5 degrees of warming, which was which was the tipping point, and why the global climate target still matters. So I think we've either hit it or we are very, very close to hitting the 1.5% of warming. Does it say if we're there? No, it doesn't say we've... Well, we've failed to ensure that we remain below 1.5 degrees. Yeah, it talks about where the limit was set, the global tipping point's 1.5%, 1.5 degrees, 1.5 degrees of additional warming. what that means, what that's going to affect. We've got the ice caps melting, we've got coral reefs, which was one of the big, among the first is the collapse of the world's coral reefs. That's one tipping point where we know it's about at about 1.5 degrees. And then all of these other things. There we go. When will we pass 1.5 degrees Celsius of additional warming? Very soon. The data is showing that we're getting very, very close to breaching global warming of 1.5 degrees. Cool. Look at that. Look at us go. Look at us, guys. The world is banded together to meet our targets. Woo! 2024 was the first year in which global average temperatures were more than 1.5 degrees above pre-industrial levels, but a single year does not define global warming. Global warming is normally understood as the long-term average across multiple years. The long-term warming trend is still below 1.5 degrees, but only just. If we expect that within the next 5 years or so, global warming as a long-term average in global temperatures will start to exceed the 1.5 degrees. Is there any way to avoid breaching it? Not really. I hate when things start with this. We saw it in the report before, which was just no. Is there any way to avoid breaching it? Not really. Emissions would have had to fall rapidly from 2020 onwards, and they haven't. We can't turn the ship around anymore in the space of 5 years. Even in the late 2010s, it was still possible, but now the very best scenarios place peak global warming closer to 1.7, and that is increasing all the time. If we wait another 5 years, the very best scenario puts us at 1.8 degrees, and so it goes. Time is not on our side. Why does it still matter? If the world couldn't limit warming to 1.5, it's easy to question the point of persevering. In fact, the world should be doubling down on its efforts for two reasons. The first is partly a legal and political one. International Court of Justice has ruled that 1.5 is a central part of the ambition and the obligations that countries have towards maintaining a livable climate. Wow, that's an international policy. Doing a great job. Doing a real good job. Real good job, guys. Once you pass 1.5 degrees, you can still get back to it, so it's still a relevant target. The second is that 1.5 is not a binary black and white threshold. It's not like everything's fine under 1.5 degrees and everything goes to hell in a handbasket above 1.5 degrees. Limiting warming to 1.6 degrees is better than limiting it to 1.7. Limiting to 1.7 degrees is better than limiting warming to only 1.8. The lower we can keep that peak of warming, the better. Getting back to 1.5 degrees would still be better than giving up just because we've already breached it. Sounds like something that Seymour would be quite happy with. Of course, it would have been better if we had managed that, but we haven't, so how are we going to deal with it? What's an overshot and how we can get back to 1.5? Earlier this year, Riesinger attended an event in Austria called the Overshoot Conference, the first global gathering of scientists to discuss the consequences of reaching 1.5 of warming and the possible paths to bend the curve back. There you go, there's Andy. Overshoot in a climate science context refers to exceeding the limit but then bringing it back to that level or below. It's not entirely infeasible in the long run, even while accepting that we will be above 1.5 degrees for a period of time with attendant great damages, greater harm from climate extremes, greater risk of tipping points. However, doing so will mean more ambitious actions from governments, businesses, and individuals. We hope. We hope. One thing that doesn't change at all when we exceed 1.5 degrees is the imperative to reduce emissions in the near term as rapidly as possible and as much as possible towards at least net zero emissions of long-lived greenhouse gases. That was the absolute minimum, though. The inevitable consequence, once you actually accept it, would be to start talking about long-term net negative emissions, so a scenario where countries take more CO2 out of the atmosphere than the totality of greenhouse gases they put into it in order to enable a world as whole get back to lower temperatures. Which is something we just talked about. Simon Watts had to go and explain why he reduced our targets. One of the things that we cannot, it's the absolute minimum, we cannot stop doing this. Very sad. Very, very sad. But lowering the temperatures, again, fix everything. If we could achieve negative emissions, then the global temperature would come down again. But the question is, would other parts of the climate system also reverse? There is much less certainty about that. Just because the temperatures come back down again, that wouldn't turn the ocean circulation that might have shut down. That would not magically regrow glaciers or the western Antarctic ice sheet. Some geophysical systems, such as long-term sea level rise, might experience a lag. Others could be irretrievably lost. Even so, going past 1.5 degrees is not the time to give up on mitigation. You need to keep going at the same pace, if not more. So there you go. That was something that came out this morning. Just to keep the world informed about all the great things happening in the world. I have hope. I have hope that there are enough smart people in the world that can convince the biggest polluters to invest in the cleaner, greener solutions, such as your oil companies, and investing into, for example, mining the minerals needed to make solar panels, and like slowly pushing them in that direction, because, you know, the likes of solar and wind, specifically solar maybe 10 years ago was like, oh, it's expensive. No one can afford to put solar panels on their house. That's changing. Huge uptake of solar around the world. And I just hope there's enough people in those circles that go, hey, you should divert from oil and gas into, I don't know, maybe we convince them to go into mining. It's like a little bit less shit. And then those materials, we can help create new tech. That tech can be clean. Clean green? Yeah, we'll see. We'll see if that happens. But yeah, like I said, yes, I have hope. Are we down to hope? Yes, we're all down to hope. It'll be fine.